Every time you speak, you leave footprints. Footprints that trace back to your inner world, your fears, your desires, your insecurities, even the secrets you think are hidden. Every word is a breadcrumb. And in a world of predators, breadcrumbs lead straight back to you. Most people believe that speaking makes them strong. They confuse noise with power, chatter with influence. But Machiavelli knew the opposite was true. Words don't make you powerful. They make you visible. And visibility is the fastest way to become vulnerable. The man who cannot stop talking reveals his soul piece by piece, his strengths, his weaknesses, his strategy, even his flaws, all of it exposed. And once exposed, it can be manipulated, twisted, and used against him. But the silent man, the man who holds his tongue even when provoked, that man becomes unreadable, mysterious, and therefore dangerous. Machiavelli never admired charm for its own sake. He didn't care for empty words or for men who thought their charisma could save them. What he admired was control. The discipline to choose silence, not because you lack words, but because you understand the cost of using them. Control begins with silence. And in this video, we are not talking about passive silence, the silence of weakness, of someone who has nothing to say. Number. This is cold, calculated, deliberate silence. The silence that unnerves your enemies, that confuses your rivals, that commands respect without a single sound. Ask yourself this. In a world drowning in desperate voices, everyone fighting to be heard, everyone rushing to defend themselves, to prove themselves, to explain themselves, who is the most feared? The one who speaks endlessly, or the one who says nothing and forces others to wonder what he's thinking? Mystery breeds fear, and fear breeds power. This is why silence, in the right hands, is not emptiness. It is tactical invisibility. It cloaks you in uncertainty. It makes others nervous because they cannot read you, cannot predict you, cannot manipulate you. While they expose themselves with every word, you observe, calculate, and prepare. And so, over the course of this journey, you will discover 9 brutal situations, 9 deadly traps, where speaking is not only foolish, but fatal. Where silence is not just wise, but the only weapon that gives you the upper hand. But before we walk into those scenarios, you need to understand the foundation. The psychology of silence. Why it works. Why it terrifies people. And why Machiavelli himself would have considered silence one of the most powerful strategies of survival and domination. Think about anger. Anger is the perfect example of why silence matters. Most men, when provoked, explode. They shout, they rant, they send reckless messages, they make promises they cannot keep. They lash out thinking that by doing so they look powerful. But in truth, they look weak, impulsive, and predictable. Because anger is the easiest emotion to exploit. Your enemies want you angry. They want you to speak when your blood is boiling because in that state, you reveal yourself. You reveal your vulnerabilities, your intentions, your lack of discipline. And once you've revealed yourself, they own you. That's why weak men lose themselves in rage. They mistake noise for dominance. They end up drained, exposed, and stripped of respect. But what about the man who stays silent in his anger? What about the man who absorbs betrayal, insult, and mockery without a word? That man doesn't react. He decides. Machiavelli would advise you, anger is not useless. It is a weapon, but a weapon with a safety lock. Do not throw it wildly. Do not let it hijack your reason. Let anger fuel you, but do not let it lead you. Because silence in anger does 2 things. It gives you clarity and it gives you control. Clarity because when you are silent, you see the situation without the fog of emotion. You can analyze the battlefield with precision, You can decide not just how to respond, but when to respond and in what way your response will be devastating. And control, because silence denies your enemy the reaction they want. They expect chaos. They expect shouting, retaliation, emotional breakdowns. Instead, you give them a cold void. Nothing. Imagine the power of this moment. They insult you, they betray you, they mock you, and instead of a storm, they meet a wall of silence. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know when, or if, you will strike back. That uncertainty is more terrifying than any outburst. This is not passive silence. This is active restraint. It is silence that says, I heard you. I felt it. But you are not worth my explosion. I don't settle things with emotion. I settle them with precision. Lions don't announce the hunt. They just kill. And when you master this, you separate yourself from the impulsive masses. You transform from emotional to untouchable. The fire may rise in your chest, but instead of opening your mouth, you open your eyes. You let silence build the weapon they will never see coming. This is only the first scenario where silence becomes your greatest weapon. There are 9 in total. 9 Machiavellian warnings. And if you understand them, you will not just avoid the mistakes of ordinary men. You will elevate yourself into a position of true, calculated dominance. Because remember this, every time you open your mouth, you risk lowering your position. Every time you stay silent, you ascend. In the next part, we will go deeper into what silence means when you are winning. Because victory, believe it or not, is one of the most dangerous times to open your mouth. And Machiavelli knew why. Victory. It is the moment everyone claims to want, the finish line, the proof of your strength, the reward for your struggle. But Machiavelli would warn you, victory is not the time to open your mouth. In fact, when you're winning, silence becomes more dangerous, more necessary than ever. Why? Because success attracts enemies like blood attracts sharks. The moment you achieve something, whether it's wealth, status, influence, or recognition, the world doesn't simply clap for you. Number. The world studies you, watches you, resents you. Your victories are fuel for envy, and envy is a poison that never rests. When you speak about your wins, when you brag, when you expose how you got to the top, you make yourself a target. You hand the envious a map to your position. You alert rivals who may have ignored you but now feel compelled to sabotage you. You awaken enemies who would have stayed asleep. Visibility invites attack. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He knew that the man who wins silently builds something far more powerful than fame. Mystique. Think of it this way. Imagine you achieve something significant, a promotion, a fortune, a breakthrough. Most people, out of ego, broadcast it. They tell their friends, their colleagues, the world. They bask in recognition. And for a short time, it feels good. They get applause, admiration, validation. But what happens after that? The whispers begin. The jealousy grows. People who smiled at you yesterday start sharpening their knives today. They resent your success. They question your worth. They want what you have, or worse, they want to see you lose it. You painted a target on your back with your own mouth. Now imagine another path. You achieve, but you say nothing. You climb higher, but you let others speculate. You let them wonder. How did he do it? Why is he always ahead? Why can't we catch up to him? You give them no answers, no explanations, only silence. That silence transforms your victories into legend. You didn't just succeed. You became a mystery. And mystery is more terrifying than proof. Silence while winning does 3 things. First, It protects you. No one can strike what they cannot define. If they don't know your methods, they can't copy them. If they don't know your moves, they can't block them. Your silence keeps your empire hidden, your growth protected, and your power intact. Second, it amplifies your strength. When you don't talk about your success, others do it for you. They gossip, they speculate, they exaggerate. And soon, you are larger than life. You become a myth. The less you reveal, the more they imagine. And often, what they imagine is far greater than reality. Third, it keeps you sharp. Bragging is a trap. It makes men complacent. It feeds the ego and lulls you into comfort. When you boast, you stop growing because you think you've already arrived. But silence keeps you hungry. It keeps you focused on the next move instead of celebrating the last one. Machiavelli would laugh at the man who brags loudly about his conquests, because the moment you announce your victory, you lose it. You trade power for validation, and validation cannot protect you. Let me give you an example. Imagine a king who has just conquered new territory. Instead of securing his borders, strengthening his forces, and preparing for retaliation, he throws a celebration. He boasts about his victories, inviting the world to see his greatness. The celebration weakens him. His enemies unite. His complacency costs him everything. Now imagine the same king wins and says nothing. No grand declarations, no parades. He expands his empire quietly, silently. His enemies remain uncertain. They don't know how strong he is, how far he's willing to go, or what he plans next. Fear keeps them still. His silence becomes his shield. This is not humility. This is strategy. When you are winning, silence tells the world, I don't need applause. I don't need your validation. I don't need to explain myself. My results speak for me. And if someone challenges you during this time, if they provoke you, if they try to drag you into an argument, do not answer, do not justify, do not defend. Because every explanation lowers you. Silence, in that moment, is the loudest possible message. It says, you are not competition, you are beneath response. Machiavelli would put it this way: when you are ahead, let others think you've peaked. Let them relax. Let them underestimate you. Because while they are busy talking, you are already preparing your next move. And when you strike again, your silence will make it devastating. Remember this: silence when winning is not weakness. It is concealment. It is the preservation of your advantage. Because what they don't know, they can't stop. So the next time you achieve something, resist the urge to announce it. Resist the need to explain yourself. Stay cold. Stay quiet. Stay in the shadows. Because the empire that is built in silence is the one no one sees coming. And therefore, the one no one can destroy. And that is only the second scenario. We've seen why silence during anger makes you untouchable. And now, why silence during victory protects your power. But there is another situation, one even more personal, where silence is not just strength, but survival. What happens when you are betrayed? What happens when someone you trusted turns against you? Machiavelli's answer is brutal, and it will be our next lesson. Betrayal, the deepest cut a man can feel. It never comes from an enemy. It comes from someone close, someone trusted, someone who once stood at your side. And this is exactly why betrayal stings more than any other wound, because it exposes your vulnerability. The dagger of betrayal is not made of steel. It is made of broken trust. Most people, when betrayed, react instantly. They scream, they rage, they demand answers. They try to confront the traitor, expose them, punish them in public. They want to show everyone that they have been wronged. But Machiavelli would tell you, this is the greatest mistake you can make. Because the moment you explode, the betrayer wins twice. First, they strike you in silence. Then, your outburst confirms your weakness to the world. Your anger makes you look unstable. Your pain makes you look powerless. And your desperate need for justice makes you look like a child begging for sympathy. The betrayer counts on this. They want you emotional. They want you exposed. They want you to reveal your cards. But silence. Silence turns betrayal into a weapon in your hands. Think carefully. When someone betrays you, what do they fear most? Not your screaming, not your rage, not your attempts to shame them. What terrifies a betrayer is uncertainty. The cold silence that leaves them wondering, what will he do? Does he know? Has he planned revenge already? Will I be struck when I least expect it? That silence eats away at them more brutally than any words ever could. Machiavelli understood that betrayal is not to be answered with noise, but with calculation. Picture this scene. A trusted ally plots against a prince, hoping to remove him from power. The betrayal is discovered. Most rulers would lash out in public, screaming accusations, trying to prove loyalty lost. But a true Machiavellian prince would say nothing. He would smile, he would nod. He would keep the traitor close, as if nothing had happened. But behind closed doors, the prince sharpens his blade. He gathers information. He studies the betrayer's movements. And when the time is right, he eliminates him, quietly, decisively, and without warning. That is the power of silence in betrayal. The power to let your enemy feel safe while their execution has already begun. But silence in betrayal isn't just about vengeance. It's also about control. Because silence allows you to dictate the narrative. The traitor expects noise. When you give them none, they are forced to imagine your thoughts. And imagination is always more terrifying than reality. Think of it like this. If a wolf shows its teeth, the prey knows it is about to be attacked. But if the wolf only stares, calm, silent, unblinking, the prey panics. It doesn't know when or how death will arrive. That dread is more powerful than the attack itself. This is why silence, after betrayal, is not weakness. It is the most refined form of punishment. You deny the betrayer the satisfaction of seeing you broken. You deny them the clarity of your intentions. You deny them the drama they wanted. Instead, you leave them suspended in fear. Every day, every night, waiting for a blow they cannot predict. Let's make this brutally clear. When betrayed, you have two choices. You can make noise, complain, confront, cry out. And in doing so, you tell the world that you were fooled, that you were weak enough to trust the wrong person, and that now you have lost control. Or you can say nothing, no complaint, no confrontation, just silence. You don't let them know what you've seen. You don't let them know what you've planned. You let them rot under their own paranoia until the time is right. Which one do you think Machiavelli would choose? But understand this. Silence does not mean inaction. Silence without calculation is cowardice. Silence with a plan is power. If you are betrayed, you do not forgive. You do not forget. You simply conceal. You let time work in your favor. You make your enemy think they escaped justice. You keep them close, smiling, nodding, pretending as if nothing has happened. And then, when they are unguarded, when they least expect it, when they believe you have moved on, that is when you strike. This strike must not be sloppy. It must not be emotional. It must be absolute. So absolute that no one dares betray you again. Machiavelli believed that mercy in betrayal is foolishness. To forgive the traitor is to invite more traitors. But but to deal with betrayal in silence, to crush it without words, to eliminate it in shadows. That is how rulers secure fear, and fear secures power. So remember this: betrayal is a test, not of your strength, but of your discipline. The man who reacts has already lost. The man who stays silent is already building his revenge. When you are betrayed, silence is not passive. Silence is the sound of control. Silence is the mask of calculation. Silence is the weapon that prepares the perfect strike. And when the betrayer finally falls, they will realize too late that the silence they dismissed was the drumbeat of their own destruction. We have now seen silence in anger, silence in victory, and silence in betrayal. But there is another battlefield, one even more dangerous: the battlefield of insults. When words are thrown at you like stones, when others try to provoke you into a reaction, what would Machiavelli do? He would do the unexpected. And that is what we will uncover next. Insults. They are the cheapest form of attack, a weapon of the weak, used by those who have no real power but want to provoke you into lowering yourself. Think about it. Words cost nothing, and yet they have toppled kings, broken warriors, and destroyed reputations. Not because the words themselves carried force, but because the victim reacted. Machiavelli understood this well. He knew that the man who answers every insult with outrage is already a slave. Why? Because his enemies control him. They pull his strings with words. They own his emotions. The man who cannot endure an insult without reaction is not a man of power. He is a puppet, dancing to the laughter of others. But silence. Silence turns the game around. Consider this. When someone insults you publicly, what do they want? They want to drag you into their arena. They want to provoke you. They want you to lash out, to justify yourself, to lose control, because the moment you do, you are no longer leading, you are defending, and the defender is always weaker than the attacker. But imagine instead you say nothing. Imagine your face does not move. Imagine your eyes remain calm, your mouth sealed shut. The insult hangs in the air, and yet you don't touch it. Do you realize what happens? First, the insulter feels exposed. They threw a weapon expecting a fight, but none came. Their insult echoes into emptiness, embarrassing not you, but them. Silence flips the humiliation back onto the attacker. Second, the audience turns. When you stay calm, when you don't answer, the crowd begins to see the insulter as desperate. They look weak for needing to attack. They look childish while you look composed. Your silence elevates you, while their words degrade them. Third, your silence becomes fear, because the insulter now wonders, did he ignore me because I'm beneath him? Is he planning something worse? Did I just awaken an enemy I cannot defeat? That uncertainty eats at them far more than any insult you could have thrown back. Picture this. A ruler is mocked by a rival in front of a court. The rival expects a sharp comeback, a duel of words, a public battle. But the ruler remains silent, smiling faintly, unmoved. The rival grows louder, more desperate, throwing insult after insult. Still, the ruler says nothing. The court begins to shift. What once looked like strength in the rival now looks like insecurity. The ruler's silence turns the rival into a clown, loud, sweating, desperate for attention. And when the ruler finally leaves the chamber, still silent, the rival's insults hang like smoke, empty, bitter, and quickly forgotten. That is the Machiavellian art of silence against insult, letting your enemy destroy themselves with their own noise. But this strategy is not just about saving face. It is about dominance. When you don't answer an insult, you deliver a message without speaking. You are too small for my attention. You do not exist on my level. My silence is worth more than your words. This is why silence stings more than retaliation. A counterattack gives your enemy value. It means their words affected you, but silence erases them. It reduces them to nothing, and nothing is the greatest humiliation of all. But let me be clear. Silence does not mean tolerance. Machiavelli would never advise you to endure insults forever. He would advise patience, silence in the moment, calculation after the fact, because the loud fool who insults you has already marked themselves. You don't need to announce revenge. You don't need to answer in public. You simply wait. And when the right time comes, when they are exposed, when their guard is down, when their arrogance has blinded them, you strike. The difference is this. Their insult was noise. Your response in silence becomes fate. And here lies the true brilliance of Machiavellian silence. It doesn't just defend. It attacks without attacking. It creates fear without lifting a finger. It transforms you from the target into the executioner. Never forget, the man who insults you is testing you. He wants to know if you are a master of yourself or a slave to emotion. If you react, you have failed. If you remain silent, you have already won. Because in silence, you show you are untouchable. In silence, you turn words into air. In silence, you rise above noise and turn your enemy into their own downfall. So far, we have seen silence in anger, silence in victory, silence in betrayal, and now silence in insult. Each one reveals the same truth. Silence is not weakness. Silence is the weapon of the strategist. But there is yet another moment, a critical, dangerous one, where silence becomes even more powerful. A moment where everyone expects noise, but silence crushes them instead. That moment is during negotiations of power, and it is the next Machiavellian lesson we must uncover: negotiation. The battlefield where words are weapons, where alliances are forged, and where power is traded like currency. Most people believe negotiation is about talking, persuading, convincing, arguing, proving. But Machiavelli knew the truth. In the arena of power, silence is the deadliest move. Because in negotiation, the man who speaks least controls the man who speaks most. Think about it. When you sit across from someone in a negotiation, there is always pressure in the air. Pressure to fill the silence, pressure to prove your position, pressure to avoid discomfort. Most people cannot endure that silence. They rush to speak. They reveal too much. They expose their fears. They bargain against themselves. And the one who stays silent? He listens. He observes. He watches his opponent unravel, word by word. Silence forces the other side to reveal their hand. Imagine two rulers meeting to settle terms of peace. One speaks constantly, demanding, explaining, justifying. He believes his words show strength. But in truth, he exposes every weakness, every insecurity, every need. The other ruler? He remains silent. He speaks little, only when necessary. His stillness forces the talkative one to keep giving more, to keep conceding, to keep exposing. By the end, the silent ruler has given nothing and gained everything. This is the Machiavellian art of negotiation, to say less and control more. Silence in negotiation works because it creates pressure. Most people cannot stand empty space. The longer the silence stretches, the more uncomfortable they become. They start talking to fill the void, and in doing so, they hand you information. They lower their demands. They weaken their own position. Machiavelli would advise, let them drown in their own words, and when you do speak, speak rarely and with precision. A single phrase delivered after long silence strikes with more weight than 1,000 scattered words. because people assume silence means calculation. When you finally break it, your words carry authority. But there is another layer to this. Silence in negotiation is not only about gaining advantage, it is also about creating fear. When you stay silent, your opponent wonders, what is he thinking? Is he angry? Is he planning something I don't see? Is my offer insulting? Is he offended? Their mind begins to race. They project their own fears into your silence, and often they weaken themselves to avoid offending you further. This is the genius of silence. It lets your enemies defeat themselves. Think of the great lords and kings of history who negotiated with rivals. The weak lords begged, pleaded, argued, and lost. The strong ones, the Machiavellian ones, sat still, watching, listening. Their silence spoke louder than words. You need me more than I need you. I can wait forever, can you? The one who can wait longest always wins, and silence is the weapon of patience. Now let's be clear. Silence in negotiation is not passive. It is not about sitting quietly with no plan. It is about using silence as a tool. Calculated silence. Strategic silence. You don't stay quiet because you have nothing to say. You stay quiet because you want them to speak first. You want them to reveal their desperation. You want them to make the mistake of thinking your silence means weakness, when in fact it means dominance. And when they finally crumble under the weight of their own talking, you deliver your terms, calmly, coldly, decisively. And they agree, not because your argument was strong, but because your silence broke them. This is why Machiavelli would say, never rush to fill silence. Never reveal too much too soon. Never speak out of nervousness. Because every word you utter is ammunition given to the enemy. Every secret you reveal is a weapon they can use. But if you remain silent, you hold the battlefield. You watch, you calculate, and you strike when the moment is perfect. So the next time you enter a negotiation, whether it's for money, power, loyalty, or territory, remember this. Silence is your strongest ally. Silence disarms the arrogant. Silence pressures the insecure. Silence reveals the desperate. And silence, when broken, gives your words the weight of law. This is how kings negotiate. Not with chatter, not with arguments, but with silence so heavy it bends others into submission. We have seen silence in anger, silence in victory, silence in betrayal, silence in insults, and now, silence in negotiation. But there is still another scenario, one final battlefield, where silence becomes more powerful than words. A moment where the entire world watches you, waiting for your reaction. And in that moment, the silence you hold will determine whether you appear as a man or as a legend. That is what we will uncover in the next lesson. There comes a moment in every life where the world is watching, a moment of exposure, a trial, a spotlight that demands you act, speak, defend yourself. It could be when your reputation is questioned, when you are accused, when the crowd expects an explanation, when enemies gather waiting for you to stumble. And in this moment, most men panic. They rush to speak, to justify, to explain, to clear their name. But Machiavelli would whisper, the more you explain, the weaker you look. Because when the eyes of the world are upon you, every word you say is twisted, doubted, dissected. Justification looks like guilt. Defensiveness looks like weakness. Excuses look like surrender. But silence transforms the trial into a performance of power. Think of the great figures of history who were accused, slandered, or challenged publicly. Some shouted, pleaded, argued, and their words buried them. But others? They stood silent, calm, unmoved. Their silence was heavier than 1,000 speeches. Their refusal to explain became their armor. Because here is the truth. When the world watches, people don't actually believe your words. They believe your composure, and silence in the face of accusation is the highest form of composure. Imagine this scene. A prince is accused of corruption before a crowded court. His enemies hurl insults, they present evidence, they demand explanations. The court murmurs, waiting for his defense. But the prince does not speak. He does not deny. He does not justify. He stands still, watching his accusers with calm eyes. His silence unsettles the room. The accusers grow louder, more desperate, revealing their own obsession. The court begins to wonder, if he is guilty, why is he so calm? If he is cornered, why does he not defend? In the end, the silence flips the burden back onto the accusers. They look frantic. He looks untouchable. This is the Machiavellian secret. Silence in the spotlight does not weaken you. It mystifies you. And mystique is more powerful than defense. Silence in the public arena accomplishes three things. First, it denies your enemies clarity. They cannot use your words against you if you give them none. Every explanation is a weapon handed to your rival. Silence leaves them swinging at shadows. Second, it projects control. The crowd may not understand your silence, but they will feel it. They will see a man who is not shaken, not desperate, not begging. They will see someone beyond reach. Third, it feeds your legend. Because silence always creates stories. People begin to whisper, what does he know? Why didn't he answer? What is he planning? The less you say, the more they invent. And their inventions often paint you larger than life. Understand this. In the age of chatter, silence is not emptiness. It is theater. Every second you refuse to speak is a stage act, designed to show that you are untouchable. Machiavelli knew this well. He knew that men who talk too much bury themselves under their own noise. But men who master silence rise above the noise, becoming something greater than men, becoming symbols, and symbols never explain themselves. This is why, when the world is watching, silence must be your weapon. Not always, forever. But in the moment of exposure, when everyone waits for your defense, hold the silence. Make them wait. Make them doubt. Make them fear. And when you do finally speak, days later, weeks later, maybe never, your words will land like thunder. Not because of their content, but because of the silence that preceded them. The world will always push you to react, to speak, to justify. But Machiavelli teaches us the opposite. Power belongs to the man who resists the pull of noise. So remember this final truth. In anger, silence shields your dignity. In victory, silence protects your advantage. In betrayal, silence conceals your revenge. In insult, silence humiliates your attacker. In negotiation, silence gives you control. And when the world is watching, silence elevates you into legend. Master silence, and you master perception. Master perception, and you master power. Because the most dangerous voice in any room is the one that chooses not to speak.